We'll take the seat. House will come to order. Sergeant, if you'll clear the aisles. Comes time for a very, very special goodbye. This one promises to be one of the most entertaining goodbyes we will have, I think. But Mr. McLeod will come forward along with others. I think he is the Newberry delegation. We have Representative McLeod joined by Representative Funderburk, Huggins, and Ballantyne. House will please come to order. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative McLeod has been here a long time. He served this state longer than most of us have been born. So I'm going to ask you one more time to please come to order. Please take your seat or please leave the room. Ms. Lori Funderburk is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. It is my honor today and the honor of what we're calling the Chapin delegation. As you know, Walt is one member of the Newberry County delegation, but there was a time when he was also part of the Lexington County delegation. Walt has been my desk mate for 10 years and my suite mate for 12. I can tell you as a freshman legislator that it was a humble and fortunate experience to be educated in my legislative duties and responsibilities by a generous gentleman with vast experience in state government and caring attention to his constituents, not to mention a wit as dry as the Sahara. Walt is a scholar, a Yale man, in fact. He served in the Navy on the aircraft carrier, the USS Ticonderoga, while it was ported in San Diego and deployed to the Far East. He also served during Operation Desert Shield, based in Naples, Italy. He is an attorney, most notably serving as general counsel for DHEC, our DHEC, 1968 to 1994. This is a photo of him as a member of the Richland County Bar in the 1970s. Before his time in the House, he was mayor of Little Mountain. And Walt has always been very active in his community. Isn't that the money shot right there? Oh, yeah. Giving out the first pitch. His family has a long history of civic involvement. This is a photo of the McLeod men with his brothers Gordon and Payton and his nephews and son. He is a husband. He is here with his wife, Julie, cutting a rug. He's a father to Tad, and now a grandfather 3 times over in the past 5 years. First there was Jay, then Thomas, and just 3 months ago, the family welcomed Caroline. He has managed all this while forging a great career in the House. Most days, our desks would be piled high with law books, and this was before the website became as useful as it is today. And so we were oftentimes referred to as the library or the reading room. To others, it may have looked a mess, but to me, it was the sign of noble industry. Walt thoroughly researches bills. His bills, your bills, Senate bills, bills coming up on the calendar. Walt drafts his own legislation and edits drafts of bills until they come out exactly to his satisfaction, every word. In fact, he edited the resolution that I'm about to present to him. Walt writes in longhand, detailed letters to state officials or constituents, and his pencil is always busy, writing notes on those 3x5 cards of his, making notes or corrections on printouts of bills or jotting down ideas. His white Oxford shirt is marked with pencil lead from the 100 times a day and more he takes that pencil in and out of his pocket. I say all this with love. Walt's brilliant legal mind, combined with his academic standards and untiring work ethic, are admirable and rare. I overheard Chairman Delaney compliment Walt one day, saying, "Even if you weren't for it, you fixed it." And that's a perfect description of Walt. His dedication to detail, to excellence, to the institution, and to the process has earned him great respect. And then there's Walt's personality that we all enjoy. He is a great friend to everyone and loves to have a good laugh. He takes a real interest in people and is unselfish and sincere in his compliments. How do you know if Walt is giving you a compliment? He extends his hands, looks you in the eye, and says, "I want to compliment you." And then he'll say whatever it was you did or said. Walt is a leader and a fighter, and he has come before this body many times to make his case, share with us some wisdom, and encourage us to make good decisions on behalf of the citizens of this state. We will miss Walt taking us to the past, taking us to the future, or to the dark side of the moon. We will miss him questioning a proposal, asking, "Is the juice worth the squeeze?" His sacred duty to serve in the best interest of his constituents in the state did, from time to time, require him to take the podium to deliver oracles of doom and inform us unabashedly when proposals were big time bad. And I believe that time will continue to prove the wisdom of Walt McLeod. I have often wondered if current House Ways and Means Chairman White feels the least bit slighted that Walt has not given him a personal honorific like our former chairman and Minister of Finance, Dan Cooper. We are a better House because of Walt. We are a better state. Humble, hardworking, kind, and highly ethical, the citizens of Newberry County and the state of South Carolina have been well served by Walt McLeod, a true public servant. When he announced his retirement, we were saddened and heartbroken, the members and the staff. Walt McLeod, we want to congratulate you on your 20 years of service to the House of Representatives, and I believe I speak for all of us when I say that your retiring from the House is the ultimate big time bad. We will miss you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to represent, perhaps for the last time, the most unforgettable character I've ever served with in my 18-year tenure in the House, Walt McLeod. Shipmate, take it away.
Mr. Speaker, my fellow House members, let me thank Laurie Funderburk for coordinating this historic event. We appreciate your many, many accolades, and I must give you compliments that this time you actually stole some of my presentation. But so I want to thank the two members of the Lexington County delegation who stood with us here. It was my honor to serve as a member of the Lexington County delegation for 10 years, representing the Chapin part of Lexington County. It was my pleasure serving with them. Thank you, and from the outset, let me just say I need to introduce some of my family members. My wife, Julie, who is back on the second row here across from my own seat. Sitting in my own seat is my son, Tad McLeod, who's a lawyer in Columbia. In the balcony, I have some other relatives. My brother Gordon, who's a land surveyor in Walterboro. My niece, Mary Carlisle Benson of Columbia. Her husband, Donald, and their two daughters, Straley and Carlisle. My nephew, Magistrate Judge Reeves McLeod of Walterboro. And there are three ladies in the gallery who have worked with me through the years and have been very, very helpful to me. One of them is Ann Owens, who was my campaign manager in 1996. I probably wouldn't have gotten elected for her, but she really believed in taking risks. She did a grand job, and she's helped me in each contested election thereafter. Joyce Grimes, my legislative aide in recent years, and Bonnie Bryant, who is my legislative aide for the current year. Not present is a lady named Rosemary Sheely Stuck, age 88, who is at home in Little Mountain today. She worked in the Blott Building as my legislative aide for 16 years until she was 84. They had a birthday party for her when she was 84, and a well-known lady in the Blott Building came up and said to me, "Is she really 84? And I said, "I think so." She said, "Well, I can tell you one thing. When I'm 84, I sure ain't going to be working in this building." So I want you to know something that you may not know, and that is that I like pushy women. My mother was pushy. My grandmother was pushy, and my wife is pushy. And the four ladies who have helped me through the years are also pushy ladies. I've accomplished much more because of them, because they were always there pushing to get the project accomplished. So thank you very much, my family, and thank you very much, ladies, who's been so helpful to me in getting elected to the House, getting reelected to the House, and provided what I would call really premier constituent service to the people in Newberry County and the Chapin part of Lexington County. Now, I haven't been a member of the Lexington delegation since 2012, but I've enjoyed tremendously working with Chip Huggins and Nathan Ballantyne. From time to time, they invite me to join them on events, and I enjoy going because Julie and I live only 4 miles from Chapin. We do lots of things there. So let me say that it is my honor and a pleasure to have served in the House for almost 20 years. In November, it will be 2 decades. First, I would like to thank the good people of Newberry County for allowing me to be their state representative for these nearly 20 years. It's been a high honor representing them, and I appreciate their trust and confidence. Also, I want to thank the good citizens of the Chapin part of Lexington County, who I was pleased to represent, as I said, for a decade. It was also a high honor representing them. I appreciate each House member for your many kindnesses extended to me during my tenure, and I hold you and each one of you in high regard and cherish your friendship. I appreciate the Speaker for his friendship through the years, and particularly would like to thank him. Now pay attention to this. I'd like to thank him for his public service, which, as you know, is focused on duty to our state and not on the dollar. His commitment to doing what is right for South Carolina sets the standard by which all other members of the General Assembly are judged. I would like to express my appreciation to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, who's allowed me to continue serving as a member of the Constitutional Laws Committee, a responsibility which I have thoroughly enjoyed. As I've said many times, heavy stuff is routine for the agenda at the Con Laws Subcommittee. I would like to thank the Minority Leader for allowing me to have a meaningful role during the past 4 years as the number 2 Democrat in the House. I want to express my appreciation to the senior member of the Orangeburg County House delegation, a former House Minority Leader who has served in this House since 1992. She has been a mentor to many legislators, including me, and I thank her for her encouragement and support. I thank the Clerk of the House and his premier staff, including everybody who works in the chamber, as well as those whose duty station is in the Blatt Building. To put it mildly, I appreciate their patience and tolerance. The staff of the committees in the Blatt Building and the staff of the Legislative Council have always been helpful to me. I generally seek assistance at the last minute, maybe 15 minutes before going on some radio program, or maybe 15 minutes before 5 o'clock closing time. The folks in the Blatt Building and the Legislative Council have been very, very patient with me, and I appreciate their tolerance. Also, I appreciate the help and assistance rendered to me by the Sergeant at Arms, his assistants in the security detail at the Blatt Building. They've been very helpful, let me in the building anytime, let me out of the garage when the door's already down. I would like to mention a little story about my relationship with the community of Chapin. Let me take your minds back to 2002, when the House Republican leaders chose to perform a shotgun wedding between me and the heavily Republican Chapin area. I was supposed to be the guy that got shot. Some newspaper wrote that Representative McLeod, and actually Marty Coates, who visited here today, had been counted out and were destined to be defeated. Well, the House leaders didn't know that my wife's dad was from Chapin, and her mother was from nearby White Rock. They didn't know that my longtime legislative aide, Rosemary Stuck, and her husband had a host of relatives in Chapin. They didn't know that 2 or 3 times a week I worked out at a place called Crooked Creek Exercise Facility in Chapin, managed by the Speaker's first cousin. And they did not know that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission would order the water level in Lake Murray to be lowered by 15 feet in order to construct the backup dam at Lake Murray Dam. The people of Chapin needed someone to protect their recreational interests, and I was pleased to become their voice. So, instead of receiving the traditional 5% to 10% Democratic vote in Chapin, I had an enormous amount of luck with the voters in Chapin, received a handsome vote in Newberry County, and won re-election to the House. As you can understand, since that time, the good people of Chapin have been close to my heart. I want to mention a story about my wife, Julie, who taught piano, music appreciation, and music literature at Newberry College for many years. At that time, the music department required each music teacher to perform an annual recital, which took weeks of preparation and practice. Well, at that time, the wife of the president of the college was a German lady who spoke with a heavy accent and probably continued to think in the German language. The president's wife attended the duet recital by Julie and the other performing artists, and also she attended the reception following the recital. She shook hands with Julie and the other performer and said, "It was a noble effort." My wife and the other performer looked stunned but kept on smiling. So the concept of a noble effort is well known to me. Because of my tenure in the House, on many instances, I've come to the well to express a voice of reason on some pending legislation. Generally, my position did not prevail, but the net result has been that with firmness in the right, I made a noble effort. In recent days, we've had some heavy and very serious comments by some of our colleagues who are taking leave of the House. So instead of focusing on any particular issues, I thought it might be appropriate to recall some of the refreshing and light comments made by me during debates in the House over the past years. From time to time, and this is true, from time to time people remind me of something I said during some spirited debate. Sometimes I can remember the comment, and sometimes I can't. One of my memorable comments, which Laurie has already mentioned, took place during the deliberations on the lottery bill. Then Representative Joel Lurie had an amendment which was quite complicated. He carefully answers a series of questions I asked him, and then in conclusion I commented that while I appreciated his keen insight, after hearing his explanation, my opinion was that the juice ain't worth the squeeze. Shortly thereafter, Representative Lurie's amendment met with defeat. Another comment I remember making in recent years related to the original Department of Administration bill, which would have allowed the governor to appoint the persons responsible for the procurement process in state government. I clearly remember urging House members to recognize that a procurement officer appointed by a governor would create the potential for extraordinary graft and corruption. I described this probability as dangerous waters which would lead the state government to the dark side of the moon. Of course, my amendment failed, but in due course, the provision for a politically appointed procurement officer was removed from the Department of Administration bill, and our state is much better off today because this change was made. Another time I remember was in 2002, during the House debates on the House redistricting bill. Then Representative John Scott and I were the only two Democratic members of the House Redistricting Committee, more formally known as the House Election Laws Subcommittee. The chairman was a guy from Union who did his very best to ingratiate himself with the House leadership by voting, along with the other two Republican members, on voting against every single one of the amendments offered by John Scott and me. These amendments also failed in the full Judiciary Committee. So I decided to offer a fresh new amendment on the House floor. As I was speaking from the well of the House, one of the leaders of the House, I've forgotten who, asked me why I had not discussed my amendment with the subcommittee chairman. I answered that I had not done so, and for good reason. Having a discussion with that subcommittee chairman was like trying to blow out a light bulb. You just couldn't do it. Some other comments which I recall took place during the first few days of my second term. It involved Representative Doug Smith from Spartanburg, who was the chairman of the Rules Committee. Chairman Smith submitted an amendment to change Rule 7.3b, which is the rule then and now, requiring a 2-minute time period before the Speaker inquires whether all members have voted. Doug Smith wanted to shrink the time from 2 minutes to 1 minute. I was quite surprised that the chairman of the Rules Committee would support such an amendment. Well, nobody spoke against it except me. I began by stating that the chairman of the Rules Committee had many wonderful characteristics, but on that day, the chairman of the Rules Committee was not always right. After a few more words of wisdom, I urged the House to be very careful about shrinking the time for casting a vote, because when God made time, He made a lot of it. Through some quirk of fate, and I really mean a quirk of fate, Chairman Smith's proposal was defeated, and we continue at present to have a 2-minute roll call vote. So a few words about the future. For next year's legislative session, I urge you to adopt 3 important goals. Number 1, I sound like Gary Simmel up here talking now, folks. Number 1, and this is big-time stuff, find a permanent revenue stream to improve and fully maintain our roads and bridges so that in the reasonably near future, we can again take pride in seeing the best state on the best roads. Number 2, amend the Constitution to require that state government must provide the opportunity not only for a free public education, but for a free, high-quality public education for all the school children in South Carolina. Number 3, accept the fact that protecting the state's environment has become a nonpartisan issue to each South Carolinian, starting with elementary school through about age 45, because protecting the environment has been preached to these people since they began school years ago and into the present. So protecting the environment has become a nonpartisan issue. And further, and I want you to think long and hard, accept the fact that protecting each citizen's health is an enormous issue just over the horizon for the voters of our state. I would like to thank each of you. It has been an honor and a pleasure to serve with you as a member of the House of Representatives. I urge you and each of you to continue to smile, continue to march, and continue to overcome adversity with the noble goal of building a better and stronger South Carolina. Good luck and smooth sailing. God bless the state of South Carolina, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you so very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Walt McLeod.
Hey. Cheers to you.